few people will be logging in. If you have questions, we have some questions that were submitted in advance, but if you have questions, please feel free to introduce yourself. If you have questions, you could also, in the info line, you could enter questions there, or you could also in there, feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. We'll copy some questions, let people get logged in, and we'll get started in a couple minutes. If you're watching this offline, you may want to fast forward 5 or 10 minutes as people are getting logged in and we're collecting questions. So we'll go ahead and get started. So once again, please feel free to introduce yourself and let us know that where you're from, and we'll get started pretty soon here in just a couple minutes, and we'll start collecting questions. Okay, so we have some questions coming in, and can you guys hear me okay? We're just going to make sure we've had some issues with the audio in the past. We just want to make sure that it's clear for you guys. All right, so we're just collecting some questions from people and copying them over. And we're usually, excuse me, some people are kind enough to actually do an index of topics that are discussed, since we discuss a large number of topics. So if anyone is watching this and wants to keep kind of an index of the topics, we could post that and people could jump to particular areas of the program, so they could, or of the Hangout, so they could find out exactly different parts and they could search easily. But I'm going to go ahead and start collecting some questions here and copying them over into my document. And once again, we'll get started in a couple minutes. Okay, so we had a question on what is this. So what it is, we're just going to be doing our Google Hangout. So we have a number of people logged in. So if you have questions, please feel free to go ahead and ask. Okay, I'm just going to play back a little bit of audio. If you guys could let me know if you're hearing it okay. We'll go ahead and let me just jump to a different project here really quickly. Let me just switch this over. Okay, so we have some more questions coming in. Let's just make sure everything is... All right, so we're seeing a lot of topics come in. And as always in the future, if you want to have particular topics that are covered in the Hangout, they're a little more involved, you can please feel free to send them to clubcubase@steinberg.net for that email. Go copy over some more emails here, and we'll get started here in a couple minutes. Good to see Danny Lux online here. All right, so any other questions? If everyone wants to just please jump on and say, do a quick introduction. I see we have 40-some people online, but if you want to just do a quick introduction, say where you're from and any topics you want covered, please feel free to enter those in. We'll finish copying over some of these questions coming in. We had some people that emailed stuff in advance, so we'll get through all that. And any questions you have, please feel free to enter it in the comments field. All right, so we have people from India and Russia and Los Angeles. Serbia. It's great. All right, so just doing some housekeeping here, and we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. All right, so we have Will from Northern Virginia. That's where I'm based out of. And we have people from Ireland and UK. Okay, just 1 or 2 more minutes and we'll get started. Okay, well, any last minute questions? And if you have questions kind of throughout the Hangout, please feel free to submit that. If the audio does get kind of distorted and crackling, let me know. Just kind of comment in the comments field, but we'll get started here in just a minute to see if there's any last minute questions I haven't copied over, and we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So one of the questions we had just submitted is from, I think, 2 different people, is why no longer support of 32-bit VST plugins. Obviously, Steinberg was one of the first companies to do 64-bit plugins, and we've been doing 64 bits since, I believe it's version 4 officially. And that came out in 2006. So it's been almost 10 years that we've kind of run a hybrid of 32-bit and 64-bit plugins. So with Cubase Pro 9, they've decided to stop using to stop bridging 32-bit plugins internally. And what this means is we haven't stopped the ability to do that. But a lot of, I think it was over 90% of support cases and issues with the program, like crashes with the program, were actually being caused by third-party 32-bit plugins. So if you want to run 32-bit plugins, there are still utilities to do it, such as JBridge. But realize that will be kind of at the sacrifice of overall system stability. So every time you're doing that, so if you still want to run 32-bit plugins, you could actually kind of see this within your plugin manager. So you may notice that a number of plugins may show up on the blacklist, and if you have it blacklisted, you could, enable them afterwards. But again, it's often blacklisted for a reason. So when we decided to not bridge 32-bit plugins, or I think we're one of the last companies that still allowed the 32-bit plugins to be used within the system. It's just kind of a way of moving forward, but we haven't blocked the capability of running 32-bit plugins with third-party bridges. So once you do that, then you should be all fine. And a popular bridging software that still works great for many people is just the JBridge. So you can consider looking into investing in that. And I think it's pretty inconsequential cost for that bridge. But again, the reason for the switch to 64-bit was to maintain overall system stability. Okay, so we're seeing a couple questions on curved automation, and some people call it Bezier curves or Bezier curves. There's a number of different pronunciations for that. So currently, a lot of people think that when you look at the automation of Cubase, that you only have some basic tools to kind of draw in manually different automation points if you wanted to, like that. Now, while it doesn't have a lot of curves, there are some other drawing options that are applicable directly within. So if you wanted to have your parabola curve, you could just draw those in. And then if you wanted to just kind of take, the shape of that, you could do that. There's also other line tools. So a lot of people miss that there are different tools here, and you could hold down the shift key to actually kind of, or I'm on the Mac, so let me just find the right modifier. So if I hold down like just the shift key, you could actually kind of change. I'll just zoom in here a little more. So with this, I could just kind of change on command. I could, adjust. So you could hold down different modifier keys, like if you want to change the frequency of these particular curves. So while it's not where you could have total control of it, you could just simply kind of come in here and have different types of curves. So if you wanted, parabola, sine, triangle, square wave. I realize it's not other curves where you have a little more flexibility, but a lot of people don't know that this part of the program actually exists. So a lot of times just trying those things will kind of get you the same sonic results in the end. I have seen it. I was in Hamburg a couple weeks ago, and this is a topic that we did have discussions on. So I think the development and planning teams are aware that people want more flexibility with the curve. So we should, I imagine we will be seeing that in future versions. I don't know when, but I know that the development team and the planning managers are very aware of that issue. So let me go through some of our questions. Okay, so just going through some of the questions that are coming in. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, so question, and this was kind of sent in 2 different times. Let me just pull my laptop closer so I can read it. How to get notes to show the proper enharmonic in the editor. And this was a lot of times dealing with previous versions of Cubase. It used to be that everything, if we looked into a MIDI editor, just come here, I'll just enter a new part. So I'll just add a quick MIDI track, and we'll add some data here. So this is a lot of times when people are editing in a MIDI domain, a lot of the values would be expressed as sharps, kind of unnaturally, like A sharp instead of B flat or D sharp. So if I come here, and let me just expand this so it's a little easier to see overall. So if I entered in a note here, all right. So one of the things you can do, so you can look at this, and this will say, B flat 4, and there's a kind of a hidden preference to be aware of. So when you do go to preferences and go to event display, and then under chord and pitches, you may just want to make sure that that is set up for enharmonics from chord track. So if you come here to the preferences, that way most of your A sharps will turn into B flats, your D sharps to E flats, etc. So make sure that that is actually enabled, and then that will probably make sense for the score editor and your general editing tasks. And that was a change that was kind of introduced in Cubase 9. So it's one of the additions that, we had people are upset always having to deal with everything as A sharps instead of B flats musically, which makes sense. So once again, go to your preferences, and under event display, chords and pitched, just make sure that the enharmonics from chord tracks are set. And then that should make a little more sense for you. Let me go through some of your questions. Okay, so we had a question on how to remap MIDI controllers from one controller to another controller. This could be done in one of the MIDI plugins. So if you wanted to go to your MIDI inserts, and then at this point you could go to, let me see, which one is it called? So this way you could say MIDI control, the input control is then going to be remapped to this I want controller, my mod wheel, control 1, remapped to my main volume. So if you do the MIDI control, you could actually just do it directly there. I think you could also do it through the input transformer. So if you have a MIDI part, there's this little crooked line here. So we could set this to local, and there may even be where you could say, okay, I want to transform particular notes, and we could activate and say I wanted to take my note event is equal to controller, and then we could say value 1 of the controller, and let's say we want to do modulation, and then you can say you wanted to transform that to value 1, and then if you wanted to just action target of value 1, and then set to fixed value, and then you could just define your controls here. So this would take your modulation wheel and then map it to panning if you wanted to do. So, but if you do that, so you could use either the MIDI plugin to do it, or you could just simply come here in the input transformer and you could save that as a preset. One thing that can throw people off with the MIDI input transformer is to actually make sure that when you do it, people will often set it up and then it's like, why isn't it working? You have to, it's a very subtle thing that you have to actually turn the power on, and you could stack up to 4 different controllers there. And a lot of times your MIDI keyboard, some people use quick controls to also do the change as well. So you could say, I wanted to come here, and if you set up your quick controls, so you can say this, I wanted my volume, pan, and you could also just go into your device setup. And when you go to your quick controls here, so let's say we go to our VST quick controls, you could define your controllers there as well. So you can say, these are my 8 knobs on my controller keyboard, and at this point, those are controlling these particular parameters. So you can do it through the MIDI insert plugin, through the MIDI input transformer, or by using quick controls to kind of get access to that. All right, let me go to next question. A question, does the soundboard have any effect when recording MIDI tracks? They're really kind of independent, but sometimes they can be tied in. It doesn't really have much of an impact on recording MIDI tracks. But sometimes if you're using virtual instruments, that will have an effect, such as the latency. So the higher the latency on your audio interface or your soundboard, as the term you used, that could affect real-time playability of the MIDI. But if it's sequencing to like an external keyboard, like a Yamaha Montage or an MX49, something like that, that is not using a MIDI interface on your sound card, it doesn't really have so much of an effect if you're using like external MIDI devices. But obviously if you're using VST instruments, the sound is being generated directly from the virtual instrument and being monitored through the audio interface. So and some audio interfaces obviously sound better than a built-in one. It's really kind of designed for Skyping and gaming, etc., for those different types of tasks. So, but for the most part, they're independent. But in the world of virtual instruments, they're often can be tied together. So if you're doing VST instruments or virtual instruments are being recorded, being played through the audio interface, it will make a sound. But generally speaking, they're kind of independent of each other. So go on to another question. All right, so we have a question in Very Audio. Is there any way to change the key pitch to anything other than 440 hertz? So when we look at like our Very Audio editor, everything here, we'll just go ahead and open this up. So as soon as we go to our Very Audio editor here, you know, when we do this, everything is going to be kind of based on, you know, the traditional 440 hertz as what your note is. Now, I've seen some people, and I see this kind of on Facebook a lot, people wanting to do everything at a lower tuning scale of 432 and feel that that's true because, you know, however some little vibrations affected like a bunch of grains of rice, so you know, different stuff like that. But what I've seen some people do is to select all of their audio events in their project, and if you actually go to fine tune, so if you actually wanted to try having a different reference point, you could actually, when you go to the fine tune settings here, we just select one at our outside group. So as soon as I select like all of my audio events, you could actually just fine tune by sense here. So I've seen some people will take all their audio tracks and fine tune it down like this so that they have kind of an offset, so that when they do their tuning, that it'll actually, so now if I moved a note in the Very Audio editor directly on pitch, so let's say if I just go to my Very Audio here, I'll just make it a little bigger so easier to see. So now as soon as we go to our Very Audio editor here and I snap something to being in pitch for this particular one, it would then play back at kind of a different reference point. So again, as soon as you select events, you can see from the info line here a fine tune control. So you could just simply adjust your tracks there to kind of offset it. So when you do move it, I know in kind of spending some time with like Stevie Wonder, to him A is 442 very definitively and not 440. So if you needed to adjust either way for different tuning scales, try taking all the audio and just slightly adjusting a fine tune from the info line. And I think that will allow you to kind of still make it in tune, but have a different tuning reference pitch or frequency if you wanted to. Okay, so I'm seeing a question on, is there a way to organize quantized presets into folders? I don't believe that there is. Let me just give it a quick try here. Let me just come over here. We'll just make this a little larger so it's easier to see. So one of the great things that you could do is actually kind of taking different grooves if you want, or if you have different drum loops. And something a lot of people don't know is the ability to kind of take those particular drum loops, and when we go into like our hit points detection, and if we adjust kind of our hit point scale here, at this point we could create a quantize, a groove. I believe they call it create groove. So as soon as we come here, we could create a groove, and now this will show up directly inside of our quantize presets. So as soon as I wanted to quantize anything, that particular groove, let me just go back out to my main project window here, and now we could see these kind of set up here. I don't know of a way to actually organize those but I will definitely kind of add that to my list to pass on to our product planning so that they could maybe work with that to make it a little more accessible and maybe even approachable from the media bay. But I don't know a way currently of organizing those. I know some people will just kind of manually copy the files over into the presets folder, but I don't know a way of organizing it, unfortunately. Sorry about that. Okay, we have a question on markers. Let me just read this. The markers window does not seem to remember its settings project to project. I want to not show the marker's ID number, just the marker names. How can I store this as a setting? I believe that this is going to be, you could do that, the markers will be kind of saved from project to project, the settings. So let me just try a new project here. So you may have to actually store it as part of a template and maybe use that to kind of start off with. So let's give it a shot. So I'll just create a quick template here. Okay, and let me add a marker track. Okay, and let me just set this up. My marker track is on top. I'm just going to drop a couple markers in. I'm just going to reread the question here, and we'll see. And just add some text here to name the markers. Okay. So just adjust. And let's say I want to save this as a template. And let me just do a new project, and we'll load up the template. So if you do that, then you could actually see kind of the marker name. So you may have to save it as a template, and that may be kind of stored project to project. Now, while we're kind of on templates, we had another question sent in. Let me just switch projects really quickly. Of how do I save a template, but without all of the audio files? So if you have like a project that you wanted to use as a template, what you'd want to do is to, and the template is really kind of set up as a starting off point. So some people will have a project and say at that point that they wanted to save it as a template. And often people will, select all of the audio files, all the files in the project here, delete it, and then save as template. And then when they do it again, it's going to still reference all of the audio files. But what you need to do is to go into the media menu here and open the pool window. And then what you could do, if after deleting the files, the template's going to still have a reference to all of the audio files here that are in the project currently, even if they're not on there, but they're still kind of referenced in this project. So what you want to do is to actually just select all your audio files, right click, and then you could actually just say you want to remove unused files. So let me just come here. I'll select all these files here. And then you have an option. Let me see if I can find it real quick. Removed unused media. Choose that, and we can say remove from pool. So I guess we have those still in the files. Okay. But once you go to your pool and then remove all unused media. So again, just come here and you could select, let me just select all the events here and delete. So again, go to your media menu, to the pool window. You want to right click to remove unused media, remove it from the pool, and then save the template. So just go to file menu to save as template. And that way, none of the audio files for the project will be stored in your template. So every time you start a new project based on that template, it's not going to have all those files carry over. So again, just go to media menu, delete all the files from the project, go to the media menu to pool, and right click, remove unused media, and that'll do the trick. So that was one of the questions that was mailed in. Let me go through some of your questions that are coming in. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. Okay, so we have a question from DJ Predator about using the like the selection tool within the pool or within the key editor to copy like a range of notes quickly. We can kind of, it's sometimes we could do that without the selection tool. So let's say if I have a MIDI part here. So we'll just go ahead and we'll add a track, and we'll add a MIDI track or an instrument track, doesn't matter. And let's go ahead and draw in some data. And I'll just make it larger so you guys can see it a little easier. I'll do some 21st century composition here. There's a number of ways to just kind of select your files here, and if you just even wanted to Command or Control D to duplicate, you could also just kind of it's very easy to kind of select. Even selection tools sometimes wouldn't allow you to do non-contiguous events, so if you did kind of a range selection, You could also just do that, and if you wanted to, let me just see if I get my key command right. So if you hold down the Alt key and drag across, you could do that as well for the selected notes. And if you have a range, let's say if I wanted to select all the notes between the left and right locators, we may be able to do that from the edit menu. So let me just choose range. No. But there's a number of ways to just kind of take the events here and just kind of copy them. And again, if you hold down like the Alt key, just to drag, or again, just say, okay, I want these notes to be copied repeatedly. Just the Alt key or the selected notes will undo that. And, or you could just say these selected notes and Command or Control D for duplicate. That's another easy way of doing it without kind of using the range selection tool, because you may not want to have every part within the range. I often find you may just want those, and now you could just copy those as you see fit. And you could, of course, freely move the events so they're not kind of tied to the timeline that you've defined. So if I want to do this, just holding down the Alt key, and then you could just kind of drag it to and place it wherever you want. So I think it's pretty easy to copy events in the MIDI editor without using or the need for a typical range tool like we have in the project window. So give some of those suggestions a try, and see, I think that will probably do the trick for you. Okay, just reading through some other questions. I see comments on sample accurate automation. I did discuss that with them when I was there a couple weeks ago. So, okay, so let me just go read through some of your questions. Give me just 1 second. Okay, so I'm seeing a question from it's Mark from Slovakia about exporting certain information such as volume to Excel. I don't know a way of doing that currently. If you have a number of, let's say, volume changes, let me just revert this project here really quickly. There's some ways of kind of looking at it a little more in a text-based or numeric. So if we actually select this particular event and then go to like our project browser, haven't opened this up in a while. So let's say if we go to the project browser, here you could see the automation, our volume automation, but I don't think there's a way of actually exporting that value. I know that sometimes people use Excel for doing like comma separated values for like in post-production, but for clip placement, like for markers and timelines, but I haven't heard of anyone doing Excel for kind of volume automation. But maybe if Mark, if you could indicate the need and why you'd want to take the volume automation out, or the volume information, maybe I'm misunderstanding, out to an Excel. There might be another way of editing it. Probably a spreadsheet may not be the best automation editor, but if you could share that info, that could be helpful to me. But thank you. All right, so we had a question on can we make instrument tracks that are mono? So there's probably a couple different ways. Sometimes some of the instruments will actually have mono outputs, but by default, if we added an instrument track here, let me just quickly add an instrument track. I'll just undo some of the automation nonsense that I've added. Okay, so generally by default we get a stereo output, but if I wanted to, let's say if I added, and this right now is going to go to our retrolog, and our retrolog is then routed to a stereo out. You could always just choose to go to just a mono output of your stereo out from your VST connections. But if we go to your VST connections, you could also actually just define. So right now I have stereo outs, but I could also just add a mono bus. And then if you wanted to just route that directly out to the mono bus, you could do that. And there's probably also some plugins that you could use on the instrument track. So if you're going for like a kick or a bass sound. So probably if you, let's see, this will do mono to stereo. But there's probably, let me just look for, maybe a mix convert plugin. You could say stereo to mono. So even if you do have a, while this will still be a stereo track, you could still have it summed to mono just as a plugin, directly as an insert. So you could route it physically to a mono out, or make sure that the VST instrument itself has mono outputs, which I know a number of them do, especially like for drums. Or within the insert effects themselves, just simply do like the mix convert plugin as an insert, and then you could have stereo be summed down to mono. So give those suggestions a try and see if they work out for you. All right, let me go through some of our questions. Thanks everyone for the great questions. All right, so one question, how do we reset all the faders in the mixer back to 0 dB? So it's a good question. So I'm going to hide my input channel. So let's say we have all these channels and I want them all to be 0 dB. It's usually control. Click, let me just... So if I wanted to do a quick link, like Alt-Shift, then I could link them, but let me just see if I could. I think there's a way to reset all of them. Let me just see if I have a quick link turned on in my mixer. Let me just hold down Command. No, it's going to do it proportionally. But you can do it kind of one at a time. If you just kind of click on, like, I think it's Control on Windows, but Command on Mac. And I'm sure there's a way to reset them all as well. Let me just... Let's see if I have these all turned on. I'm pretty sure there's a way of doing it, but there's kind of a link that you could probably do it through linking as well and do one, but you could do kind of one at a time by just holding down control and clicking on the fader itself. Just the way of doing multiple channels at once is kind of eluding me, but I'm sure there's a keyboard modifier to do it. All right, let's go through some of our questions. All right, so we had a question on sampler track about snapping to grid. Let me just read through it again here. Hang on. All right, so about resetting filter curves when snapping to grid. So let's say if I just wanted to take my media bay here, let me just drop in a sample here. I don't know of a way to do it off the top of my head. So if you kind of hold down some of the modifier keys, you can, like the shift key will kind of make it, but I don't see a way of snapping it to grid. I could do some more research on that if you want to email me back, but it might just not have that capability currently. All right, so I'm seeing someone that the transformer worked for the mapping MIDI MIDI CCs. That's great. Thanks for letting us know. Okay, so I think we have a question on the mix console. Is there a way to have a key command for, I think, for overriding a link, I believe. So let's say if we're all linked here, let me just link these mixer channels. And then you have kind of just the modifier key to overwrite the one particular channel. So let's see if there's a key command. I'm not aware of one, but I haven't looked for it. Take a quick look. Be under probably the mixer console. For suspend the channel within the link. Let me just... Yeah, I don't know of a key command other than just holding down the modifier key. But I imagine maybe you are using a control surface and you want to be able to have access to the control surface of that. I know some surfaces like the Yamaha Nuage, you could just easily suspend a link group of automation. But so if you wanted to just do this without holding down the Alt key, I believe is kind of what you're looking for. If I'm kind of misinterpreting your question, just feel free to add an additional comment, but I don't see another way to trigger key command, but I'll pass that on. Okay, so we have a question on do I ever think there will be a way to export the color schemes? So I think this may be stored perhaps. I would have to kind of restart the program, which I probably don't want to do in the middle of a hangout for boring everyone. But make sure there's a good chance that they'll be stored within the profile manager. So if you haven't done this, you could probably set up set up your color schemes. And a lot of people aren't necessarily so aware that the color schemes can change. So if you go to the color tool here, there's a little drop down menu that's hidden. So if you wanted to go to your project colors here, you could go to options, and if it's, if you actually wanted to come here and increase or reduce the intensity of colors, but you could actually make your own color schemes as well. So if you wanted to define your own colors, you could do that. And I believe, I'm not 100% certain, but that will be carried over into your profile manager. Not 100% certain, but there's a good chance that the profile manager, once you save that and then you restart it and you just simply come over here and say, okay, I just want this particular profile, that you could load up your personal profile, and I believe that the colors would carry over, but again, I'm not 100% certain. So give that a try. And if you've tried that, just let me know in the comments. But I believe that should do the trick within the profile manager. All right, let's go on to the next question. Thanks, everyone, for the wonderful questions. All right, so we have a question on opening up the left side of the mixer with the key command in Cubase Pro 9 Windows. So let's go ahead, come here. So I believe it's just going to be, let me just check my key commands because the one I just used didn't work. All right, so all right, let me just. All right, so I thought from the key commands here, for the show hide left, I'm on a Mac, but let me just check, see if it's a different key command. It's kind of indicating a key command here that doesn't seem to be working. So if it's on the main, if you have the mix console here, try just the, I think it's Alt Control L on Windows or Command Option L on Mac. But let me just see, once the mixer is in full screen view, I don't think it's translating over. So let me see if there's, so within the full mixer view, you might just have to turn that off. But let me take a quick look at the key commands and see if there's a different key command for the mix console. Just get the name so I can type this in. Okay. It's, for me, it's working on the main project window, but it's not working on my kind of full dedicated mixer screen. So see if you get it to work here within the mixer. So I could adjust my visibility here, or if I wanted to just see it on the main project window. I don't have the latest build, which I should on my computer. But that could be a factor as well. But check to see if it works on the project window and not in the main mixer. And you can leave a comment or email me back at clubcubase@steinberg.net. Okay, so getting kind of a clarification on the markers that never want to see the markers visible. So let's go back to that. Thanks for the clarification. Let's see if that's possible. Let me just go ahead and add a couple markers here as we're doing it. Okay, just yeah, I don't know a way of permanently hiding the marker IDs here. You could just kind of move it out of the way. So if you don't want to see it here, or if you don't want to see it there, but obviously, unless there's a name, let me just try this and see if we enter in a name. If the number goes away. So if you kind of just move it all the way over to the right, it looks like the number will still be there. I'll pass that on as a suggestion. So I see where maybe you didn't want to see the marker number at all. I'll pass that on. So thanks for coming back and clarifying that point. Let's go through some of your questions. All right. So we had a question. Is it possible to send MIDI information from instrument track to another instrument track? So let's give it a try here. Okay, so we'll add 2 different instrument tracks here. Okay. So just add that. Okay, with I don't know of a way to do it quickly with the instrument track, but if you hold down, and you could obviously copy the events. If it's a MIDI track, one of the things that kind of differentiates, there's still a few little oddities that are differentiated from MIDI tracks and instrument tracks. But if I had this part going out of a MIDI track, you have your MIDI sends, and what MIDI sends will allow you to do is to actually just copy that particular MIDI data and route it out and actually send it to a particular instrument track. Some instruments can obviously transmit MIDI themselves, such as like Groove Agent, SE or Groove Agent do it. But with instrument tracks, you may have to copy, but with MIDI tracks routed to virtual instruments, there is the MIDI sends. And I know a lot of composers like this for, layering quickly multiple sounds. So you can just come right over here and just say, take this and send it to 4 different instruments. Or 4 different MIDI tracks if you wanted to, but this could be routed to an instrument track. But to initiate it through a MIDI send, it would have to be a MIDI track currently. I'll pass that on as a feature suggestion. I think I've mentioned it in the past, but I'll kind of reiterate it. But that's one way of doing it. Of course, it's, if you hold down the Alt key, you can just copy parts easily enough, but no way to kind of do it in real time. Currently. So a lot of people, if they're layering, will just simply, take 3 different sounds and record simultaneously from the same MIDI input. So I know a lot of people do that as well. Okay, so we had going back to our range selection. Something else that you could do, as you mentioned with the range tool, is cutting parts. But let's say if I come here, if you grab, you could also, we could do kind of the lasso select technique for, selection of notes. But I think we could also do it for, muting of notes. So if I wanted to come here and just mute particular notes, I could do that. Or I believe we'll give it a try. I think we can even do it with the eraser tool. So if you just kind of do a selection of notes here, They could be selected and erased. You have to kind of click on it, but you could select with the eraser tool and just click on those notes too. So those are some other tools, but I understand your point about using the question earlier about using a range selection tool in the key editor, but a lot of the functionality with kind of selecting by kind of the lassoing technique could be used with the other tools as well. So, all right, let's take a look at some more questions that are coming in. All right. Question is, let me just move my laptop a little closer so I can read it. Can you briefly show best practices for creating stems of both individual tracks as well as submixes? So let's go ahead and take a look at this. There's a number of ways of doing this. Let me just jump back to one of our projects where we have a number of different groups set up. All right. So when we do, let's say if I have a number of different different files here. So let's say one of the things you can do is to easily group tracks. A lot of people miss this one handy trick. So let's say I have all my drums here. I could actually just right click, and then you could actually assign a group, add group channel to selected channel. So I could take all my drums, send it to my drum bus. I could take all my vocals, send it to a vocal bus or a group. Now, one of the things that's super handy in Cubase is the very flexible routing. So let's say if I wanted to give someone who's maybe not slick enough to be running Cubase, part where you could actually say, okay, I want to give them each individual file plus a group file and effects file. This is where we could get into the batch export. So we could do our export audio mixdown, and here, once you do this, we could, and this works between the left and right locators. So just kind of, be cognizant, be aware of that. So, sometimes people have like 4 measures selected and they do an export audio mixdown, and it's like, oh, why is only 4 measures long? It's because the in and out points are kind of set by the left and right locators. So if I come here, we could see this little icon here that says batch export. So this way I could take all of my drum tracks. So I could take all of my audio channels, and I could take my group channel. So let's say if I wanted to now come over here and I have a number of background vocals, and let's go ahead and group my background vocals together. So I'll take this channel, and to kind of select all these channels, I just select one, hold down the shift key, and select the next channel, and it will contiguously select all those. I'm going to add a group channel to this selection, and we'll just go ahead and call this Vox. So now when I do my batch export, again, I go to File menu to Export Audio Mixdown, and then at that point I can say I want not only my individual files, my effects channels, my virtual instruments, so I see my individual files here plus their groups, and then I could just actually create a new project, and it will make like an equal length audio file based of all the different elements kind of broken down for you. So a really effective way of doing it, just again from your file to export audio mixdown, and then at that point just simply see You know, you have your group channels plus your individual channels. If you had virtual instruments, they would be listed, your effects channels, all within, and then you could create a new project or import it directly into the existing project. So it's a great way of being able to deliver stems easily. So it could be loaded into any video program, and the files will all be time stamped as well. So okay, so someone wants to copy over their preferences from their old version of Cubase on Windows into Mac, kind of all the preferences. Depending on which version you have, it will basically just be set up. You could copy it over with your profile manager. So if you if you have 8.5 previously, and then you could save your profile and then just simply import your profile manager into your new version on your Mac, and that will carry over. If you need to go searching for the particular preferences, let's see if we can find it here real quick. If you go to one of the little nifty hidden secrets on Mac, if you want to go to the library files, you could just go to the Go menu, and you have to hold down the Option key and go to Library. And then from here, you would go to, they're kind of scattered in two different places. So you see Preferences, and in here you would see Cubase 9. So here you have a number of your XML files. So again, if you go to Library on the Mac OS X, and go to Preferences to Cubase 9, you could copy the contents of this folder. That's where you'd copy the contents over, and that way you could have everything kind of managed in your presets, everything carried over from PC to Mac. And in the PC, it's kind of in kind of equally as elusive place initially. And the reason in the application datas folder, and the reason for that is so that, you know, when you uninstall or reinstall, that, you know, your preferences will carry over from previous versions, and it's intended to not allow you to kind of, you know, accidentally delete those important files of how your Cubase works for you. But if you have 8.5 and are going to 9, just do the Profile Manager, and that's really kind of the intention of that feature. So it's a great feature that was kind of introduced in 8.5. So hope that helps, and have fun on your new Mac. Okay, so we have a question on how do audio ins work? And I think, is this dealing with like the plugin inserts, like the audio inserts for the plugin? So let's go ahead and take a quick look at that. I'll just create a new project here. And I'll just load up a retro log. Okay, so, and let's say I'm going to go ahead and just find, okay, let me find a drum loop here real quick. Okay, so we'll go ahead and just kind of drag that onto our project window. And let's say if I wanted to repeat that a bunch of times, I'm just going to just grab its right edge. Now, one of the things that was introduced in Cubase 9 was the ability for different instruments to have an insert. So once we kind of turn this on, I could now route this drum loop, and I could do it, just route the output of that directly into Retrolog. Or you could do it through, if you wanted to hear it simultaneously, like the original source, you could do it through a send. So now what we're going to do is, as we would play different MIDI parts, I'll just have my virtual keyboard here. And what we want to do is to make sure that once the insert is turned on, that we want to turn the input on. I'll just kind of turn some of the oscillators down here. So now what you could do is actually, as the audio is kind of playing, you could now just kind of route the drum loop directly into, let me just set the audio out directly here, might make a little more sense. Let me just kill the send. But at that point, you could take the audio output of the particular drum loop and then feed it through the input channel of the actual plugin here. So that allows that path, so you could actually run it through different filters. And using this in conjunction with like Halion 6, what you're able to do is to route the audio directly into Halion 6, so you could do the onboard sampling. So you could take kind of any source and then just kind of do as creating a signal path. So you want to make sure that the audio side chain is turned on. And once that's on, you see the input here. Make sure that's up, and then you could adjust the different oscillators, but you could adjust the filters. So that's how you could actually do the audio ins to different instrument plugins. All right, so just reading through a couple questions. So we had a question, is Cubase 9 stable on Sierra for Mac? Yeah, it's been working great for users, so it's been really good. So, you know, when a new operating system comes out, there's a lot of stuff that will actually kind of change in the very last minutes before release. So it often takes us a lot of time, because our development cycle may not be in sync with the development cycle of OSs. So they do pretty extensive quality assurance when a new OS comes out. And like with Windows 10, Steinberg found some significant issues that Microsoft was able to fix within a couple weeks. So we could certify that kind of benefited everyone doing audio. But yeah, Sierra will work great for your Cubase 9 and 8.5. So don't worry about switching in the middle of the project. All right. Go through a couple more questions here. Thanks for all the great questions again. Question, if you install Cubase 9, will Cubase 8.5 still exist? Yes. So when you install a new version, like a lot of times the content will be shared. So it'll reference the same content. It'll reference the same key commands. It'll carry over those files for you from your preferences, your application data folder. But both programs will still be on your system, and you could uninstall if you want to, but we don't want to make the customer uninstall their previous version that was probably working fine. So you could run a new version and the old version, which comes in handy when, for instance, if you have projects in 8.5, they're using 32-bit plugins, and we don't have that in Cubase, and we don't have 32-bit plugins natively bridged in Cubase 9. So at that point, you could finish the project and render it in Cubase 8.5 and then load it into 9. So both programs will be installed independently, and then you could uninstall the previous one if you want to, but you don't have to. So that's the reasoning behind that. All right, just going through some more questions. All right, and one point with that, seeing in the comments that when you upgrade from 8.5 to 9, that the license says Cubase 9. But what that means is the license will work with previous versions. So while it says Cubase 9, that means it works with 8.5 or 8 or 7.5, etc. So just to clarify that question and point that was brought up in the discussion. Okay, so we had a question on rendering multiple files with render in place, going out to like Halley and Sonic, for example. Let me just load up a project that has that. Okay, so we'll just go ahead and listen to, probably still loading up some samples here.
For 1,000 years and a day, you were the party, the big event. I was your everything.
So let's say if I want to take this file, and these are all going out to Hallian or Hallian Sonic, hold down Shift key, hold down Shift key to this file. And then you could take multiple parts, and let's say I just wanted to render, and I just think I used the current settings, and what it's going to do is, again, kind of take those individual parts here and just render them out directly underneath. So you can see these are panned to different directions, where you see one more on the left and on the right. And then this way you could see kind of all of your different audio files that will automatically just be rendered as all your MIDI tracks. So if it's one part or 12 parts or 1,600 parts, you could just do the render in place settings for multiple parts at one time. And some of the settings to be aware of with the render in place. So we'll just review these again. So you could render them as one event or separate events. So if you wanted them to be separate events, just as they are. So if you have like a 2-measure MIDI part that's repeating over and over again, you could have a 2-measure audio part. You could have it be dry. You could have the channel settings, which means inserts, EQs, in channel strip, or add to sends, or add to master effects. You could mute the source events as well. So, but yeah, it's very easy if they're going out to Hallian or Hallian Sonic or any virtual instrument, just to select multiple events and just render them. And it's not just for audio, or not just for MIDI being routed out to virtual instruments, but you could do it for audio events as well. So if I have this audio part here, which has been kind of cut up and done all sorts of edits to minimize breaths, and I've cut these and they have a number of different files, I could actually select the track itself and then go to render in place. And if you have the track selected, when you go to the render settings, at this point, you have some other options. Let me just, I probably have one event still selected somewhere. So now we go to render in place. And if I wanted to remove the original source tracks, I could just come here and choose to render. And it's going to take my vocal. Let me just abort that because let's say I want it to be one contiguous event instead of multiple events. Sorry about that. So I'll go to my settings here under my render in place. So if I want to take that one part that was rendered and edit it, but I don't want someone else to mess it up, I could just say, let's make it as one event and then just choose to render. And as we do this, we now have kind of one contiguous event with all of my little volume changes. And again, we could undo it right after the fact as well. So yeah, you could take multiple parts and use the render in place functionality very effectively. All right, going through some questions. They're coming in. All right, so I'm seeing, why don't we put chunk features from another program in Cubase, more Cubase features. Well, I think we have a lot of Cubase features, but one that not a lot of people are so aware of is kind of using the arranger track. So if I wanted to actually come here, we could add an arranger, one of the tracks that we could add. So I'm going to come here. This is a feature that gets underutilized quite a bit. So let's say I just want my arranger track, and I could define different sections of my song to say, okay, I want it a part there. Just say this is my intro, this is a bridge, this is a chorus, and I wanted a part within a part, etc. And then you could actually just kind of build your own arrangements, and you could build multiple arrangements that you want. So if you're doing like a jingle where you have a 16 and maybe a 15-second, 30-second, 1 minute, 2 minute commercial, you could just kind of have this. And when you go to turn on your actual keyboard, you could actually just come here to the arranger track and activate it. And instead of playing back linearly, what it'll do is you could actually just say, okay, let's play this back, and it'll jump around. So instead of playing straight linearly, you have that repeated twice. So that way you could kind of have parts of audio. Some people, will use the term chunks, but you could have different sections and change the order. And if you wanted to flatten the chain, to just take that and automatically turn it into a linear arrangement, you have that methodology as well. So there's some cool things that not a lot of people are hip to with the arranger tracks, kind of an underutilized feature to work non-linearly. Yeah, we have a lot of features for film composers as well. So many noted film composers are doing all their work in Cubase, but they're always adding more features, as we know. And we see that the development cycle of Steinberg products kind of far exceeds any other company in the industry. Okay, so we had a question on the mixer. Let me just on the show hide channel feature. So there's a number of different ways to do this. So let me just jump to another project. I'll activate it. So there's a number of ways to kind of filter particular events on our project window. We could do it from our project window or directly from the mixer too. So let's say if I didn't want to see any of my drums on my project window, we could just simply go right there. We could show or hide individual parts. Now this can also kind of, with some modifier keys, work in reverse. So if I only want to see those drums, I could just hold down, or only want to see those particular channels, I could just hold down my shift. And then we see in configurations here that you have some different options. So if you wanted to show all the tracks, but if I only want to see drums in this particular view, then you could actually just add this as a configuration and add like 1 for drums. And I just wanted to see only my Vox in this particular configuration. So you'll see your configuration here. And then at this point, we could say, okay, I want this to, I'll add a configuration, and here we'll call it Vox. Now there's a little hidden icon here that's very subtle that allows you to sync the visibility of the project and the mix console. So if I go to my mix console, let's say, and you could choose one of the 3 mixers in Cubase to do that with. But if I hit F3, at that point, now we could only see those particular. So if I wanted to, again, just come over here and we can say, okay, we're going to sync the mixer here. Let's say I want to see all of my channel configurations. Again, just kind of go to the right, and there's some nifty presets here as well. So if you wanted to just hide particular channels or groups of channels if they've been organized in folders, very handy and very easy to do within the mixer. Now, something that's really handy that a lot of people aren't hip to is some of these presets. So if you wanted to see only, let's say I could show all channels, but I could also show channels on tracks that have data. So let's say if I'm a composer and I have a 3200 3200 track template, and all of a sudden it's I don't have data on 1800 of the 3200 tracks, I could say just hide tracks that don't have any data. But one of the things that's really handy is as we're playing, let's say if I have a large project here and I hear something weird kind of going on at a particular point in the project. I'll just fast forward here a little bit. And if I'm in the mixer, let's say I'll take it to my full screen mixer view. I could also say show tracks that are only playing at the cursor position, and it will just hide all the tracks from the mixer that aren't playing at that moment in time. So if you have tracks kind of scattered throughout the entire project window, so let's say my cursor position is right here, I'm in my mix console, and I only want to see tracks that are playing on at that particular moment in time, just simply go right here and show tracks are only at where the cursor is, and it'll just show only those particular tracks. So if you're kind of playing your mix and it's like, oh, something really weird happened right there, you could just filter out all the tracks that don't have any data playing at that moment in time. So these will carry over. This was originally kind of introduced in the mix console, these visibility zones with Cubase 7, and obviously by popular demand, they carried over then into the main project window. Now, something else that's interesting is you could have kind of your visibility set up here for the project window, but you could also have independent track visibility for this particular mix console here. So the bottom mix console can have independent track visibility from our main project, from our main larger mixer as well. So if I only want to see drums here and then go into let's say on this particular one, I could say we're only going to see drums on this view, but now when I go to this view, I could see only my vocals. So the lower mixer view can have its own independent visibility settings as well, but each one again can be turned on or off independently directly here. So just kind of be aware when you're working in a project window, which of the tabs is active. So you have kind of your channel visibility here for the project window, as well as in the bottom zone, you have when this is active for the mixer here. So, but a number of ways of hiding channels in the mixer. All right, so just reading through a couple of our questions that are coming in. Okay, so the question that's before us now is it possible to record multiple MIDI tracks simultaneously from a VST instrument with multiple MIDI channels? Example, machine from NI. Yeah, you can easily record multiple MIDI channels. So let's say if I were to kind of create a project here, I could we'll add a couple of instrument channels from, I'll do some, just hide my input channels here. Okay, so I'll just load up a retrolog here. Let's say Hylian Sonic SE. And let's say we'll just do this for a multiple instance of, so if I wanted to come here, and let's say I'll just add another instrument. So really all you have to do is, we have different instruments loaded up here, and all you have to do is literally just arm them for record. So whether it's going to be, and whatever is going to be selected here, I could just place this into record here. And then all three of those tracks have been recorded just like that. Now, one question that kind of comes up sometimes in regarding scenarios like this, and I'm not sure if this is kind of the genesis of this question, is sometimes if you have a controller that can output multiple MIDI channels and you want to be able to filter maybe this zone of your controller or the drum pads to different instruments that are being transmitted. This will kind of take all incoming MIDI data and pass it directly to the instrument channels. But when we go to the inspector, if you need to route individual channels and filter out channels for different controllers, like let's say you have a machine and a keyboard and maybe a guitar synth or another drum machine, and you want to record those different devices all live to different MIDI channels, you could go here to the input transformer that we saw before. And these are actually some of the presets where you could actually kind of filter. And if you just kind of click on the presets here, but here you could actually filter particular channels. So you can say only channel 4 passes to this node. I may not have it installed, but there are presets for pass only channel 4, pass only channel 6 within the input transformer. But if you wanted to kind of layer multiple sounds together, just simply put them on record enable and just hit record. If you wanted to actually filter out different types of channels to different devices, just simply use the input transformer, and then you could filter different MIDI channels that way. All right, we'll read some of the other questions that come in. All right, so we had a question on upgrading the metronome for different subdivisions. I did discuss this in my last trip to Hamburg, so I know that development is aware of it. But we did have a pretty robust plan for that. And someone else had kind of commented that even just changing the click sound would be helpful. So if you wanted to actually change the click sound, you could do that currently. So if you hold down, just get the right modifier key here. Let me just so let's go to our So if you wanted a different metronome sound, you can currently come here. So I think we'll see more subdivisions coming in the future, and the product planners, they understand that need quite well. But you could also, if someone just wanted to replace it with a different sound, you could just load up any standard. If you go from beeps to sounds, you could load in any WAV file that you want, or actually just have it go to particular MIDI instruments if you wanted to as well. And if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.net, I have done like a number of different for Groove Agent, for the full Groove Agent, if you have that. And some of these will carry over to Groove Agent SE, but I have kind of a preset of all the Cubase Cubase clicks with all of different meters and subdivisions. I'm happy to send that preset along to you if you have Groove Agent 4. But again, you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.net. Okay, we have a question on finding the gain control in the mixer. So if we wanted to come here, let me just it was kind of placed in a different area, and as mentioned in Cubase 5, and during the Cubase 7 mixer, it kind of changed places. So we'll show you where the gain control is at. So let's just jump over to this project here really quickly. So we'll look at our full mixer, and it's actually found, you know, and it kind of, the intention is that this follows the signal flow. And I get this question also, you know, where did the gain go for the mixer channel, or where did the phase switch go? You could actually go to, at the very top of the mixer, so under routing, you have a pre section. Now, if you don't see pre, you could actually just kind of go to the racks here and just make sure that pre is turned on. And here you'll have your phase reverse, your high cut, low cut filters, and your gain. So you could just reverse the phase, adjust the gain, and your high cut, low cut filters are all found there on pre. So before, they used to be closer, like right above the fader here. You know, and we had talked about that the last time I was meeting with the product planning as well, of maybe repositioning the phase switch closer to the fader. But right now you can find it in the pre section of the mix console. We got a question: is there a way to step record in the music notation screen? So, yep. Let's go ahead and do new project here. And this is kind of one question I often get is, okay, I wanted to start off with some MIDI data, and how do I get into notation? And often people look at this and they go to the score editor and nothing shows up. We have to actually have kind of a container for the data. So now that I have this, we can go directly into our score view. And there's two different views that we could do on our score view as well. I'm just going to restart my Cubase here real quick. Sorry about that. Just going to share the screen. We'll do a new empty project. All right, let me make sure we're sharing the screen. Okay, so I think we're back. Sorry about that. All right, so if you wanted, I think the notation kind of works the same way as for doing step entry as it does in the other screen. So I'm going to just open up my score editor. And let me kind of just zoom in here a bit. So when we go to look at this, we want to just put on kind of your stair step here. And now, so this will allow you to like stair steps. This will allow you to do step entry. And at this point, I'll just turn on my virtual keyboard. So just kind of, I don't have my MIDI controller. Here we go. I'll just move I have a MIDI controller here. I'll just knock the octave. So now I could just enter in one note just in step entry, just like that. So the little icon. Now, if you don't see that little icon, make sure that if you go to kind of the setup here, I think make sure that the step MIDI input is enabled, and then that icon should become visible for you. But if you don't see this little group of icons here, just kind of right click in here or go to the setup window and make sure that that is turned on, and then you could do your step entry for MIDI data. All right, so we had a question on how to create a macro. And sometimes the request was for how to do one more complicated. Let me see if I could come up with one. So macros are basically a series of keyboard shortcuts. So if I wanted to go to my key commands, one of the things you could do is to actually show macros. And I think I have some set up here. So if you wanted to build a macro, so let's say I wanted to build a macro. Let me see if I can just come up with some scenario for a macro. So let's say if I wanted to I'm just kind of blanking on a scenario. Maybe if I'll kind of just deconstruct a couple macros here. So when you go to your key commands, just because I'm kind of blanking on something to generate a macro for. If you have a suggestion for the macro, please let me know, and I'll be happy to kind of try to create it for you. We create a lot for kind of our blind clients. So in this essence, what you want to do is when we want to do a new macro, we could actually just kind of come here and type in new macro. All right, so you can give it a name. And then what you want to do is to actually, from the key command. So you can come over here. So let's say, okay, I want to go to MIDI. And in this, I wanted to so let's say I wanted to add a couple functions. I could then add that command, add this command, add this command. And then as soon as this macro is triggered, it's going to actually just run these three different commands. Now, sometimes when you're building complex macros, one tip that I can suggest that I could pass on is you sometimes may have to wait like a split second for a window to pop up for a macro to engage a function on that window. So there's times where sometimes you may have to have like just a little bit of time, like a little pause. And one of the things that I will often do is just have the macro, if I needed to insert a pause between these two, I would go to do something really innocuous like, okay, I'm going to turn on, one of my favorites that I do often is to turn my transport on and then turn my transport off. So, and sometimes that will give you enough time to actually trigger the event, and then you could say, okay, just hit OK on this dialog box that comes in. So, if you wanted to, let's say if you wanted to, duplicate the track without any data. So here, what this macro is going to do, and again, you do project, duplicate tracks, automation, delete, track versions, select all on tracks, edit, delete, and then at that point, your macro can actually be triggered directly, and they'll show up from the edit menu, and all your macros will just be able to. So if I wanted to just come here, duplicate that track without any of the events. So you could do stuff like that. So very powerful thing to kind of really, get into if you want to be a power user, because then the interesting aspect is from your macros, you could actually, and sometimes you could take multiple macros and trigger multiple, and I've had to do this for some scenarios with composers where, I'll take two different macros and chain them together, but you could actually set your own key commands to trigger a macro, or trigger a macro by trigger one macro that contains multiple macros within it. So think of it as just a series of key commands that you can automate the sequence of execution or pressing those keys. So let's go ahead and move on. All right, so we have a question in regards to loop mash. Is there a way? All right, so I've been playing with loop mash recently. I cycle short loops in the project window that play loop mash on top. Is there a way to record audio out of loop mash 8 different channels as I'm jamming? So what we could do is, there's some clever things that you could do. So let's say if I have loop mash going on. Okay, so now I'll come over here to loop mash, and let's say I have this going on. And let me just go ahead. Let's do a new project here with loop mash. Okay, so first thing we want to do is to actually, when we go to loop mash, is to activate all of the outputs. So if we come here, I haven't done this in loop mash in a while, but let me just think if we... Okay, so now we see that the individual outputs here. I'll just turn this down a little bit. So loop mash will automatically route the outputs here, and sometimes you may have to assign them within an instrument. But when we look at our mixer, I'm gonna now, let's say I'm gonna add, we have, let's see, 5. I'm gonna add 5 group channels here. Okay, and we could add kind of multiple group channels or multiple outputs. So I'm just going to create kind of phantom groups here. And then let's add 5 stereo audio tracks. Okay. And now what I want to do is to take the output here. So I'm going to open up the big mixer just so I can see my routing. So I'm going to see my routing here. So I want to route these through. So I'm going to hold down my shift key. This is a great trick too. And set that to group 1. And then you notice it's group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then for my audio channels. So now these are feeding my groups that I see here. So my blue color are my groups. And then for my 5 audio channels, I'm going to set their inputs. And again, hold down the shift key, and this is going to ripple the inputs and the outputs. Oh, if I have them selected, sorry. So shift key, now group 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So now as I'm kind of playing around with loop mash, and you can do this for any virtual instrument. So I'm going to place these audio tracks into just a quick folder. And now as I start playing and move different performance controls, I could place this into record. And everything that I just did will play back as strictly audio. So I could pass. So you can create kind of groups or outputs, kind of phantom outputs, and then you're able to record the audio real time from a virtual instrument directly into Loop Mash as well, or directly as audio. So again, whether it's Groove Agent or Halion or any other virtual instrument, just take, so as you kind of play around with it, you could print it as audio as you're interacting with it. So because sometimes we have virtual instruments that are random. People are like, I loved how it was so perfectly random there, but you play it back and it's not going to be the same. So this way you could actually capture the audio output from the virtual instrument in real time. So route it to a group, set up audio tracks, and set the input of those audio tracks from the groups, and then you could capture it very easily. Okay, question is, what options do I have in Cubase in 8.5 if you don't want to invest in Halion 6? There's a lot of incredible sounds just with the included Groove Agent, with the included Retrolog, and the Halion Sonic SE. So you could really kind of play around with those sounds. And I know many producers and, do all sorts of amazing work and #1 records that just use all built-in plugins and sounds. So, really explore kind of all the content that comes with it. Halion 6 will give a plethora, just so many sounds. But if you're not interested, and it's really an ideal solution for doing sound design and making your own sounds. But if you just want access to a large number of sounds, check out just the Halion Sonic as well, which is a little less money. But you get so much content with the stock Cubase 8 that it's really, make sure that you've gone through every different preset, because there's a lot of great options available in the program to, just from the start. So, seeing something about MIDI notes that are playing back too early. I haven't experienced that. Sometimes what can make a difference for people is making sure that, one thing you could try is to make sure that the constrained delay compensation, which is this little icon here, try toggling that as well. And that will often kind of resolve issues like that. So give that a try and see if that makes a difference. I just was helping someone yesterday, and it just totally did the trick for them. So we had a question: will the Hangout be available to stream later? Yes, it will. So it'll be on the Cubase YouTube channel, so you can stream at any time, so you can catch it from the beginning as well. So. I think it's actually going to be here on the Cubase channel as opposed to the Steinberg software channel. So this Hangout, the Hangouts are always available online for reference afterwards. Okay, question of hiding all plugins from views to get to the main mix console. Let's go ahead and try to recreate that. I don't know the key command off the top of my head, but I think we'll take a quick look at it and see. So probably if you have a lot of inserts, let's say this going on, and let's say you have these kind of scattered all over the place. I think if you let me see if there's a key command to do this. I'm sure one thing that you can do is let's try just saving as a workspace. So let's add this, let's say to our project workspace. There may be a key command, and I'll take a look if you wanted to email me afterwards, but let's just see if we add a workspace here, call it 2. Then this way you could just say 1 and a workspace to have it as 2. And you can set up key commands for that. So try that, and I thought that there was a bring mixer to front, but it depends on if plugins are always set to on top. So try experimenting with the workspaces. I think that will help with that. So I see someone just got Cubase and they're confused. One of the things, just kind of keep playing with it. It's like getting a whole recording studio your very first day and, saying make a record, just tackle a little bit every day. And, it's kind of like learning a musical instrument in a lot of ways, but, it does a tremendous amount of things. So, but just tackle one little thing every day and then you should be in good shape. It's like I want to accomplish a particular task like tuning vocals or programming drums. Just accomplish that and go through different workflows, and while it does everything, that's a beautiful thing and sometimes can be overwhelming, but just, Cubase will treat things at a very simplistic level if you approach it that way. But all the power tools are there, but they're not always in your face. So that's one of the things I always liked about Cubase. Let's go on to some other questions. All right, so we kind of covered this question earlier about easiest way of doing stereo channels to mono. You could actually create mono buses if you wanted to. You could create, you could run it through the stereo to mono plugin, the mix convert plugin. We showed that a little bit earlier. But it's also kind of up to, the program of what it's actually spitting out as well. But you could route it to, two different groups that are set up in mono as well if you wanted to. I see a question. I studied Cubase tutorials for years. I still only know 50%. It's a lifelong learning experience. So it's an incredibly deep program, but many people have made incredible records with knowing 5% of Cubase, and that's kind of the beauty of it. But again, don't be overwhelmed. Just kind of have, just tackle one task at a time. It's like learning a song on piano or guitar. All right, so I'm seeing a question. Whenever you start and stop, you always hear a small click with the MR816. And is there a preference for like a fade in, fade out? I don't know of one. I mean, I haven't. I generally don't hear like the clicks when using my MR816s. I know some programs will do just a little bit of a fade. What sometimes I've known people to do in the past. Let me see if it, if you go here, there's kind of an auto fades setting. So if you come here, you could try adjusting kind of the auto fade settings. So, and you could do that kind of, maybe it might be a bit arduous for you or a bit tedious to do it, but, try setting up your auto fades and see if that will help. I'm just reading through some comments, and we have some questions that people had sent in. I'll get to those in a minute, and then we'll start to wrap up. Seeing a question, is it possible to sidechain in Cubase elements? Let me just see. I think I will open it up real quick. I'm not 100% positive. We'll take a quick look. And while we're looking at this, I see a question about, is there a key command for steps of the buffer size? Most of the audio interfaces, ours included, since they kind of open up in a separate app, I don't know a way to have the key command for that. So I don't think that there's a way to have it a key command to kind of switch back and forth between like a lower latency for tracking versus mixing. So let's go ahead. We have Elements 9 open up here. We'll add an audio track. And let's just go to my inserts. So it doesn't look like some of the plugins that allowed sidechaining in Cubase 9 allow you to do it in Elements. Sorry about that. I'll check another plugin just to make sure. So it doesn't look like Cubase Elements will allow you to do the sidechaining like I'm sure that the Cubase Artist does and the Cubase Pro. So question, is there any differences between save as template or as project once all pool references are deleted and such? No, some people will actually just start from a project and, but building a template just kind of pops up in a very convenient, accessible manner. So some people prefer to have templates, but you could also kind of start off with a project. But for file management, if you start off with a template, you could have the program automatically define where the project folder would be. So that's another reason some people prefer that. Okay, so we had a couple questions, and we're going to wrap up pretty soon here as I have to pick up my son from school. But let's go through a couple questions here quickly. All right, we had a question about showing results columns for in Media Bay. The question is about kind of storing different results columns for within Media Bay here. So let me just, I don't know way to what we've done for some, you could have sound browsers, mini browsers, and these what I've seen some people do that are Media Bay junkies is have these 4 set up for, if you're just doing loops, and have these kind of set up for different scenarios. Like the Media Bay may be set up more for, projects, your loop browser for loops, sound browser, your mini browser for sound effects. But I don't know a way to, and once it's kind of set, it's kind of static, but there isn't like, I think the question is, if I'm understanding correctly, that we will to have kind of different results columns for different types of media. So maybe if you set up, under the media menu, you could have different settings for, the media bay, loop browser, sound browser, and mini browsers. I've seen some people use those for different types of tasks. But I could do some more research. I'm not sure that it doesn't exist, but I don't know how to do it. So move on to some more questions. Okay, we had a question, how do you copy from one project to another? One is you could just import track archives, and this would allow you to import, particular tracks that were exported. You could also just one of the things that was added in 8.5 is when you actually go to import, you could go from import tracks from project. So if you choose a project here, you would see all the available tracks. But one of the great things at Cubase, as you can see, we have multiple project windows open, is, people just will often copy, just drag and drop between different project windows directly in, or again, if you, come here and choose to copy, and then we go to another project here. And paste. So it's very easy to kind of get projects from one to the other. One question we had was kind of a independent solo function. And what's kind of interesting about this, I'll just open up. So let's jump to this. And this is a cool thing of the control room. So the question was, they had the control room open, and as they're working, let's say they had kind of the big mixer open, and let's say, so we have our big mixer, and as they're kind of playing back, you can very easily, we'll just come here, and let me slide this over. So let's say we want to go to our bass track. So we see a way of soloing the track, and we do that, it mutes the other tracks. But there's also this thing called a listen bus, which is what the L is. So within the control room, you could actually kind of set how much of a difference that the tracks will dim down. This way I could still hear it in context. So once the control room is active, this way if I just want to take the kick and listen to that, or just my snare, just hit the L, and I could hear that kind of in context. And while we're in the control room, someone had asked about defining a 2.1 setup, and a 2.1 isn't a definable setup in the control room, and you could set up the control room directly in your VST connections under the Studio tab. So you could add stereo, you could add 5.1, but it's really designed for kind of a dedicated discrete channel for the control room, because we have no idea of knowing where the crossover point is if you're doing like a subwoofer. So if you wanted to draw, to have your 2.1, you could, do a 5.1 channel and define it, but it's not going to be an accurate representation once you start mixing down. So, so you might, depending on your monitoring scenario and your monitors, sometimes, you have controllers that will take off the LFE, but it's probably not the best use of technology that I would recommend. So, the control room isn't going to set your crossover point or know where the crossover point is in your system. So, Just going through some of your questions. Thanks everyone for wonderful questions. All right, so one question was, can you limit what parts of the score are printed by the cursor? All you have to do is, if we have, let me jump to our project here. It's kind of whatever parts that you select, you could print out. So it's not really set by the range locators, but by the length of the part itself. So if I wanted to come here, let's say if I wanted to see this entire piano score, I could do that. I could also, if I just wanted to print out just like the chorus of it, I could just copy or just split with my scissors tool. And now I could print out just that particular part. So it's really on the score editor will show you what is selected is kind of what the important thing is. So if you only want to print out a portion of the score, just select a portion of the score by using the scissors tool and then open the score editor and printing parts. All right, just going through some more questions before we wrap up. Okay, we had a question on adding quintuplets in the score editor. I haven't done this in a long time. Give me just a second here. I think there's a build n-tuplets function. So if you want to do this, you can now just say you want it to be the type of 5, and we'll make it over, let's say 4/4. Let's see if I select that. I could play with this a little more, and we could do it on next hangout. But if you go to build n-tuplets, you could just do it from there. So I think you could do up to 17 tuplets. All right, we had a question. How do you turn off MIDI channels in the lower zone in the mixer? Like how to filter different mixer types. So if we have the mixer here, if you actually click on this little icon here, at that point you'll get this little option, and then you can pick and choose what types of tracks that you want to see in the lower zone. going through, see if there's any last minute questions. I know we have some questions we didn't get a chance to go to. We'll just see if there's one more we can sneak in. All right, so when entering step notes in the MIDI editor, how do you change kind of the rhythmic value, I believe the question was. So say we're in step mode now. There's just looking, I think there's a little. So I think if you just have it set here, this would allow you to set the value and it's going to follow that rhythmic value, or you could have it follow the quantization value for the step entry. See, quick question is a way to open up the automatically last used project. I think if you go to preferences, so I think if you uncheck Use Hub here, I think there's. I think there's a preference for on startup. I thought it was under general that may have allowed you to look for that particular. Let me just take a quick spin. Sorry, just take one quick look through this, see if I can. I think it's a preference called on startup, do this, and I think one of the options will be open last selected project. Sorry, I couldn't find it. Okay, seeing a couple comments on bringing up Acoustic Agent. I'll show you kind of a quick way of doing that within Groove Agent SE. So say you go to your instrument and we have Groove Agent SE. So, or if I just start it from an instrument here. So I'm going to go to, if you want to quickly open up the Groove Agent SE, the acoustic. This is what I do. So by default, when you come here, you'll see kind of this window not be visible. So the filters. Just click right there, and then you could see the Acoustic Agent SE directly from there. So try just to make sure that you have those different agents just kind of set up right there, and you should see the Acoustic Agent SE. So that makes it a little easier. Okay, I see a quick question on having different takes be different colors. I'm not sure if it'll just maintain a track color. We'll give that a try here. I'll do a quick. All right, so it looks like it's all going to be the same color, but let me see if we could recolorize the events here. So you could color it after, but it's not going to, I don't know of a way for it to automatically increment based on every time that a track has been added color-wise. All right, so I'm seeing, I haven't read the whole thread, but it's a couple points I think about. I saw separate visibility for the lower zone versus upper zone. So there are independent visibility for the mix consoles. So if I wanted to come here, we could add our tracks here. So let's say now I have this visibility. So when you're in the visibility here, you could actually see kind of the visibility settings for here. So if I wanted to only see those there, but when I go into my main mixer, I could see all my channels. So the lower console mixer and the full mixer can have independent visibility settings. Okay, with that, I'm going to go ahead and wrap up. We've gone for about 2 hours and 45 minutes. I'm going to have to go pick up my son from school. I want to thank everyone for all the wonderful questions. I'm sorry I didn't get to all the questions. If you want to submit questions in advance, feel free to send it to ClubCubase at Steinberg.net. If you like the video, you can obviously feel free to like it and make sure you subscribe to the Cubase YouTube channel. We're trying to do 2 of these a month because we keep getting more and more questions, so we want to help you guys out. If you found it helpful, please feel free to kind of send questions in advance. We want to thank everyone for participating from all over the world. We'll go ahead and wrap up, and I just want to say thank you for such a great day of questions. Hope everyone learned a tip or trick or two, and I'll pass on some of the feedback to our development team and our product planning managers. But we'll go ahead and wrap this up and look for an announcement. If you subscribe to the YouTube channel or to the Steinberg Facebook page, you can be notified. And if anyone's done an index of all the topics covered, we only discussed 1 or 2 things, that would be wonderful to include. Once again, thank you very much, Everyone have a great, wonderful day, and we'll talk to you next time.